Pockets of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Stanley, and with me today is my good friend, Denise Moulton. How are you today, Denise?
Good. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to have you on the show. Denise has spent the last few years researching her ancestry, genealogy, and went on this journey, both, physically, because you went to Italy, but also sort of a journey of personal nature too, right? Because you got to learn so much about your family. Let's go ahead and jump right in. What was it that made you decide that you wanted to start researching your family genealogy and led to this learning about dual citizenship?
Well, it's just something that I've always, even as a kid, I was always really interested in. I just didn't realize, I always thought that I had a very small family. I always wanted to know more about that small family. And once I started researching in about 2015, that's when I joined ancestry.com. I realized that I actually have a pretty large family. And it just kind of went from there. I accidentally found out about dual citizenship. I was at a church function. There was a man sitting next to me that was overhearing a conversation about ancestry, and he had just been to Italy. So he kind of jumped into the conversation. He said, "Oh, you're third generation Italian American." And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Oh, did you know that you qualified for dual citizenship?" And this was in 2018, maybe. So I'd already been researching for a few years and I had never heard anything about dual citizenship before. So this was complete news to me. So I took that information and I passed it on to another friend who also has Italian heritage. And we started researching it. And it turned out he was kind of right, but it's a little bit more complicated than what he said. And the more we researched it, the more we, were interested. And hey, we can do this. We found out that we both qualified. The ball started rolling from there.
That sounds so exciting, though. I think that it sparks this kind of, oh my gosh, okay, what can I find out now? And what can I find out now about the different members of the family and what they've done or accomplished and maybe where they came from? And so that's kind of, I think, what happened for you, right? Is as you began diving into all this, you learned more about the different family members and where they came from, right?
Yeah, obviously, I always knew that I had family from Italy. I didn't know exactly where they were from, so finding that out was pretty exciting. I always suspected that it was Sicily, but was able to confirm that and learned about the town that they came from. And it turns out that a lot of people from this particular town immigrated to the Bay Area. So from there, I was finding there was a lot of people in the Bay Area that I'm related to that I had no idea that I was related to. Having been from there and living there my whole life, I in fact even went to high school with somebody that I was related to, and I had no idea.
So were
So
they
it was fun to find things like that out.
For sure. And so I'm assuming then you connected with them through this process.
Yes.
And were they like second cousins, third cousins? How did you find out you were related?
All of the cousins, everywhere, everywhere from second cousins and even more distant relatives. But it's been pretty fun, and everybody is doing Ancestry DNA or 23andMe, so it's bringing a lot of people together.
Yeah. All right. So I wanted to ask you, you said that this person had told you that if you were, third generation, you would qualify for dual citizenship, but you said it was a little bit more complicated than that. So what was it that you found out? And like, how did you go through the process of then figuring out you're qualified and you could apply?
The biggest thing is probably the website for the Italian consulate. In this, in California, or in Northern California anyways, it is in San Francisco. And they have everything laid out on their website. There's also Facebook groups that are dedicated to the process. There's one in particular that has a ton of information. It was super helpful in tracking all the documents down that we needed. It's more complicated than just generational. There are people that even are first generation that don't qualify. It basically works the person that is your, and it's sort of an unofficial abbreviation, LIRA, they call it. And so it's your last Italian registered or born ancestor. When they immigrated, they had to have had the next person in line, that person had to be born before they became a citizen. So
Oh,
in my
okay.
case, it was my great grandfather. He immigrated, my grandfather was born, and my dad even was born before my great grandfather became a US citizen. So therefore, he passed down citizenship to my grandfather, then my dad, and then me.
Wow.
So
Okay.
there are people that are first generation, but maybe their parent immigrated, and then if they became a citizen right away, that ended their ability to pass on Italian citizenship. So it's
I see.
individual for each person. Some people use their great 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 grandparent.
Wow.
Some people, it's just, you know, a parent or a grandparent. So everybody's process is a little bit different.
Yeah. So yeah, that totally makes sense then. That it would be different for every single person depending on the situation, as you just explained. So that's super interesting because obviously, having not done any of this kind of research, I wouldn't have known that. So very interesting. Thank you for sharing the details of that. And so then it sounds like even though your father was born here, your grandfather was born here, because your great grandfather hadn't become a US citizen yet, that's how you were able to qualify, being that many generations down.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, for some people, like my great grandparents had 5 children. If they had a couple children and then became U.S. citizens, it would have broke the line for any children that they had after that. So
Oh,
even within families, there are different situations as far as whether you qualify or not. So it is a little bit complicated. And also lengthy process to figure all this out, but definitely in the end, definitely worth it.
so speaking of lengthy process, how long did it take you, kind of start to finish to work through all of this?
So again, it's a little different for everybody, but I started in August of 2020. And of course, that was right in the middle of COVID. So, because of that, it did take longer to collect a lot of the documents that I needed. I had already had a couple of them when I started, but everything through COVID was just so slow. That I started then, and then I didn't become a citizen until just November of 2022. It did take a while. I've seen where some people, it takes them less time, some people, it takes more. Going through it, it seemed like it was taking a long time, but now when I look back, it seems like, yeah, it really didn't take long. It's a pretty involved process, so it really seems like it should have taken a lot longer now that I look back.
And given the situation with COVID, there was, people weren't working in the same way, so getting a hold of things that you might need from, say, a courthouse or some kind of records from Hall of Records or whatever, you wouldn't be able to get them quite as quickly, in
Exactly.
that case that, some, like, say now, where everybody's kind of back to normal. That's so cool though. I mean, I think that I love that you did this and that you went through this process and you learned all this. It's exactly why I wanted you on the show to share about this. What were some of the steps then that you had to take? Because I'm sure there was a number of documents that you had to get a hold of in order to really get this process finalized.
So, if you apply at a consulate in the States, there's a different set of rules versus applying in Italy, like I did.
Mm.
But when I did first start, the plan was to apply at the consulate in San Francisco, and they do require more documents. So, I was collecting the naturalization certificate from my grandfather, my great grandfather, all the birth, death, and marriage records for each person in my line. So, great grandfather, grandfather, father, and myself. That's basically all the documents that I had to. It doesn't seem like a lot, but it did take a while, especially the naturalization document. It took a while to track that one down. And then I think it took like 8 months to actually receive it. And then after that, they have to be certified documents. And after that, you have to get apostles from the state of origin. And most of mine were California, but I did have one that was in Chicago because my grandfather was actually born in Chicago. After that was around that time, after I got all the apostles, is when my friend and I decided we were going to apply in Italy, in our ancestral hometowns. So then I didn't need the death records after that, because Italy, for whatever reason, doesn't require that. But then that was a whole nother process of finding someone to help me and get all that organized. I had to have residency there, so I had to have a rental contract, and of course an actual place to rent, and I know very little Italian, so I needed someone to translate for me once I was there, just help with the process over there.
Sure. Well, I wanted to step back for just a second because you mentioned something that I'm not sure what it is. You said apostles?
Oh,
Up,
apostles. Yeah.
apostles?
Oh,
Okay,
sorry.
what is that?
Okay, so certified documents, an apostle, the best way I can describe it is a certification of a certification. So
Okay.
for instance, most of my documents were out of Santa Clara, California, but then you take them to Sacramento, and Sacramento gives them an additional authentication. So
Okay.
it's basically another piece of paper that they staple to your original record saying that, yes, this is legal.
Yeah. Okay. So that clears that up. Thank you, because I was like, I don't know what that means.
I never heard
Um,
of it before this process either, so I'm not
yeah.
surprised. It's who knew that you would need to have a certification of a certification. It's crazy.
Yeah. It sounds like an opportunity for another fee. I mean, and I can't imagine like what the cost of the documents were each time you had to get copies of things,
It
sent to you.
actually wasn't that expensive, but
Oh.
the thing, I hate to keep saying this, but it seems like with this process, there's always, it's always so individual that what was my situation could be different for someone else. So it really depends on where you're getting your documents from, because of course, every county, every state has different costs. Surprisingly, California was not expensive, so that was great. But there are other states where it costs more. Chicago, I believe I only paid a couple of dollars for the apostle. So
Okay.
that was probably the cheapest thing that I had to get. It does vary. Every county, every state has different prices for things. So, and they also have different levels of difficulty. And again, I was surprised California was so easy to work with. But when it came to getting my grandfather's birth certificate and he was born in 1915. So you don't think it would be a huge issue to get a document, and it was. I had to fill out a lot of forms and explain exactly why I wanted it. It was a bigger ordeal. California, they were like, fill out this form, give us a copy of your driver's license and get the form notarized and you're good. We'll give you whatever you want. So my friend that was going through this process with me, she had quite a few documents out of New York State, and that she ended up having to hire a lawyer for,
Wow.
because they were not handing things over very easily at all. So again, it varies depending on where you're having to collect your documents from.
Yeah. All right. That makes sense. And you're right. I'm kind of surprised that California was simple to get the documents that you needed and the process wasn't that complicated. So that's good news if you live in California.
Yes.
And then you mentioned also about not speaking much Italian. And so then I want to kind of jump into, you actually said that you went to Italy to finish the process instead of doing it here in the States. And so let's start with not speaking Italian so much and needing somebody to assist you with some translations. How did you meet that person? And was it actually a member of your family, like distantly related?
Actually, no. So the person that I ended up hiring is pretty well known in the Italian dual citizenship process. The main thing that he does is collect documents from Italy. For example, I needed the birth and marriage record for my great grandfather. I tried getting it myself and I wasn't getting a response from the comune, which the comune is equal to like our city hall or county. I don't even know, because I don't think they call it city hall anymore. Wherever the head of your city is, where you would get documents, any legal business is done, county register's office or something. So it's similar to that. I wasn't getting a response. And so I hired this person. He lives in Sicily and he got the documents for me. And when he got them, he included his business card. I thought that that's all he did. I thought he just collected records for people. And then I saw on his business card that he helps people when they apply in Italy. And so I had already had this good experience with him. I just reached out to him and he was the one that ended up helping me with the process. It ended up being, I don't even know the words for it. So he had to get me an apartment and he did that. And I got there and it turns out that the people that I was renting from, I'm actually related to.
Oh my
And
gosh.
that was just a fluke, that, I mean, he had no idea. They don't have the same last name as me. Like it was just, yeah, it was a complete surprise. It was a really great experience. And I couldn't have asked for a better person to help me.
So it sounds like the gentleman that was helping you not only got the documents for you and lined up this apartment, was he also the one that helped you kind of with some of the translation?
Yes, he went to my appointments at the Comune with me so that he could translate. But luckily, there was also a person that works there that had briefly lived in San Jose.
Oh my
So
gosh.
in this town, everyone knows San Jose, California, because so many people from the town had immigrated there. So they have family there. They know people that, live there or have lived there at some point. And one of the clerks, turns out that when she was very little, she lived in San Jose and she spoke English. So that was a big help for me also, besides the person that was helping me. She was so cute. When she heard San Jose, she even teared up the first
Oh,
time that I was there. She was like so excited to have someone from San Jose that they're visiting.
that's
So
cool.
I mean, that having that connection to the town made it a little bit easier to go through the process because they welcome you just that much more.
Yeah. And I love that the family that you rented the apartment from turned out to be related to you. And so how did you discover that and how are they related exactly to you?
So they're distant cousins. The husband of the woman that owned the apartment that I was renting, his grandmother was the sister of my great grandfather. So he's
Oh,
more similar in age to my father. So if that makes it simpler, him and my father have grandparents that were brother and sister. So
okay.
yeah, and we just were talking about who I was related to, and I had found the house that my great grandfather was born in. Well, of course, his grandmother was also born in that house. So when I mentioned the house, he knew right away, oh, we're related.
Oh my
So
gosh.
it was so exciting. And they were very good to me while I was there.
Oh, that's awesome. So tell us a little bit more about the time that you were there, because I was following along on your journey with you as you were going through the town and you were posting photos of all the places that you were going. So what was that like for you being there and enjoying that? And have you ever traveled solo before? Because I think you went by yourself, right?
Yes, I did. The original plan, my friend was going to go with me, and her family's also from Sicily, although a different town, but we were going to go together, stay in different towns, meet up to travel around the island together. But she had some more difficulties with her paperwork than I did. So she's actually in Italy right now. Her process was delayed a few more months than mine. It was the first time I had ever traveled solo. I had been to Italy before, but I had never made a big trip like that solo. And it was good. I wasn't nervous about it. I think I had worked on this process for so long, and I knew that I was staying in a town where I had family, and I didn't know who they were, but I knew there was some family there. And I was excited to find family and to find the house that my great grandfather was born in. I didn't think too much about it. I wasn't nervous about it, but it was an amazing trip. And my maiden name is a name that's very prevalent in that town. So whenever I would introduce myself, Italian women don't change their last name when they get married. So actually, now that I'm a citizen there, I'm a citizen in my maiden name. So I would just tell people, and they recognized you as being somebody with ancestors from the town. So everybody was very welcoming and very nice and very patient with my lack of Italian. So that was super nice. It was just incredible.
Yeah. So did you pick up more Italian when you were there? Like kind of get some more words at least so you can
Not,
try to
not
communicate?
really. I have really been struggling to learn. I've been trying to learn for a while and it's been a struggle. It's not coming naturally to me, but I'm still trying. I was more nervous about it in person because I was nervous about making mistakes. I
Mm.
didn't want to sound like an idiot, by using the wrong word or the wrong gendering of the word, just like in Spanish, things are gendered. And so I just, yeah, I was very nervous about speaking. So it was hard.
Well, how did you find the people when you tried to speak Italian? Were they like gracious about it, that they understood that you were making mistakes because you weren't a fluent speaker, or how was your experience like that?
Yeah, they were good about it. They were really patient with me. They would correct me, but not in a rude way. And they would try to help me. And I found at one point, I was there probably a month and a half. And the grocery store, this is a very small town, and the grocery store was also very small. But in all that time, I could not find eggs. And I was like, where are the eggs? And I finally worked up the courage to ask somebody, in Italian, and he answered me in English.
Oh.
And the whole time I had been going to this store, he had never spoke English. So then it kind of hit me. He was nervous about speaking English to me, and I was nervous about speaking Italian to him.
Mhm.
So after that, I felt a lot more comfortable. I knew that not everybody knew even a little bit of English, but the people that did, they were just as nervous with their English as they would even say, "Oh, excuse my English." And I would say, "Oh, your English is better than my Italian." So people were very gracious, I thought.
Oh, that's awesome. Did you ever find the eggs?
I did. I forgot. Well, he pointed them out to me. I was looking in the refrigerated section. I was forgetting that in Europe, they don't refrigerate their eggs. And so, of
Right.
course, they were right in front of me. I was just looking in the wrong areas.
Oh my gosh, that's interesting. Another difference in our cultures in the way that we handle our food. So I wanted to ask you, now that you are a dual citizen, like what are some of the benefits of that?
So a lot of people, like through the process and being on the different groups, I found that a lot of people really just want it as a matter of pride for their heritage or
Mm.
to honor their ancestors, which I think is kind of where I started out at. But the more invested I got into the process, and of course, I think it helped that my friend was also going through the process with me, I started thinking bigger about it. And of course, then when I was there, it really cemented it. So, as someone who's visiting, you can only stay in Italy for 90 days. 90
Mm.
consecutive days. So if you want to stay longer, you can stay the 90 days, then you have to leave for 90 days and then you can go back. Now that I'm a citizen, I don't have that restriction, and I would like to spend more time there, especially in my ancestral hometown. I also would actually like to buy a place there now that I've stayed in the town, and I was there for almost 3 months, just shy of 3 months. I loved it. I love the people. It's right on the ocean. Yeah, now I would actually like to buy a place there and spend more time there. And, maybe as I get older, even more time. You can buy a home there without being a citizen. But again, even if you own a home there, you can only stay for 90 days at a time. So you also can't buy a car. I could now. I don't know if I ever would. There are crazy drivers there. But it just opens the opportunity up to spend more time there. And also, because now I have an Italian passport, I can travel through Europe a little bit easier with the Italian passport than just my American passport.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a good point. Tell me, Denise, what was the most surprising thing that you learned through this process? Like maybe what surprised you about going to Italy or about the process that you took or something maybe that you learned about yourself? What can you share with us?
I think the most surprising thing was how emotional the
Mm.
experience was. Leading up to actually going to Italy, I was so excited. I was so anxious about everything. But then the first day that I was in my ancestral hometown, we came upon my great grandfather's, the house that he was born in. And immediately I was just sobbing. And I'm
Oh.
not much of a crier. So, I mean, it definitely surprised me how I was excited. I knew we were looking for the house. It just, when I saw the door, it just hit me. And I was just so emotional. And then again, when it was time to leave and I was saying goodbye to my cousins that I was renting from, I was crying again. It was such an emotional experience, in a good way, but it really just, as a person who's not very, I don't cry easy. I'm not the type usually to cry at movies or things like that. It did really surprise me how emotional and how much, even just after 3 months, how tied I felt to the place. I felt
Mhm.
such a strong connection and such strong emotions about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, now of course I just can't wait to go back.
So do you have plans already lined up to go back then?
I don't have anything lined up, but I am wanting to go again, maybe just for a few weeks before summer. I would
Mm.
like to look at some apartments there and see if it's possible that there's anything that I'm interested in buying and just visiting. It's good, I feel like, to keep up that connection with the people that I've met there. I'm excited to do that too.
Yeah, for sure. So it sounds like you also learned that you're probably a little bit more capable of doing some things that you didn't think you could do before.
Yeah, I've always been very anxious about going. For example, I've never been to your house before. So if I was going to go drive myself to your house, I would be nervous because I'm
Mm.
just so bad with directions. I am just directionally challenged. It's terrible. Even with GPS, I tend to get lost. It's terrible. So after taking this trip, solo, it made me more confident about doing things. I recently had to go to a courthouse that I had never been to in a town just outside of where I live now. I was a little nervous and I thought to myself as I was driving, I went to Sicily by myself and I did fine for 3 months. Why am I nervous about going 2 towns over and finding this little courthouse? So it definitely has boosted my confidence that I don't have to be so nervous that I'll figure it out.
No, that's excellent. And thank you for sharing that. So
Mhm.
Denise, I just thought of a question that I wanted to ask you. And you've got a couple of daughters who are adults now. What are their thoughts on all of this? Like, were they interested in the process that you were going through? Did they not care? What are their thoughts on it?
They don't care at all. They think I'm crazy that I went to Italy for 3 months. If they had been minors when I did this process, or if I had done the process much earlier, I could have included them in on the process so that they would also have dual citizenship. But because they're adults, they have to apply on their own.
Mm.
So I hope that, maybe one day they might. They're definitely eligible, so they could at any time. For now, they're not interested. It makes me sad, but I would at least like for them to visit Sicily someday. And my younger one is a little more interested than my older one, but hopefully at some point in time, they'll both. Maybe when I buy a house, they'll both be interested enough to take the trip.
Well, yeah, for sure. If you've got a house to go stay in Sicily, why would you not go? I don't know. I would want to go. So I wanted to ask also, through this process, you built up your chart, your ancestry family tree. And, we were talking about kind of offline that you have a lot of information on one side of your family and not so much on the other, but you've been able to discover some information because of Ancestry and some of the people in your family that you've connected to. What was that like, and how did that come about?
I just reached out to the people that DNA showed that I was most closely related to. Oh, there's a few that didn't respond, but the ones that did respond obviously had a stronger interest, and they were wanting to see what I knew, and I was wanting to see what they knew. So it's definitely a collaboration when people do respond, that they respond because they're wanting to know more and they're wanting to help. Yeah, so it's been pretty exciting to find family. Like I said, I just always thought I had a tiny little family, and to find out that I have so many people out there that I'm related to is just amazing.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, thank you for sharing that. So to wrap up, I always like to ask if there's any books that you've read that you want to recommend that might be helpful for the listeners who are beginning this journey into researching their genealogy, or if you want to mention the websites again that you got some of the documents, that would be great.
Okay, the Italian consulate, I believe there's 9 of them in the States. For me, like I said, the one would be San Francisco. So, you could check with the local consulate to see on their website what their rules are. There are also groups on Facebook. One of them is US Italian Dual Citizenship, and another one is Italian Dual Citizenship Social Club, or it might just be Italian Citizenship Social Club. But for people who are not Italian, I know not everyone listening is going to be Italian. If you're interested in trying to figure out if there is an opening in your heritage, for instance, my mother was Portuguese, so you could also look, same thing. There's tons of groups on Facebook, the different consulates, whether it's like a German consulate or Portuguese consulate. You can always refer to those places if you're looking into any kind of dual citizenship. One thing I didn't mention is when you have citizenship in a country that is part of the European Union, you're also a European Union resident. So I guess I should have mentioned this when you asked me the benefits. So having Italian dual citizenship, I could also live anywhere else in the European Union as well.
Okay.
So I'm not just restricted to Italy, although that's where my main interest is. There are a lot of people that pursue whichever type of dual citizen they can get because they want to relocate somewhere in Europe, maybe not the country of their ancestors' origin, but just into some other country in Europe.
Sure. That's good to know. Yeah, thank you for adding that. So just to wrap it up, is there any books that you read during this process that would be helpful?
Yeah, no books.
Okay.
Everything was basically online. Like I said, the consulates or the groups on Facebook.
Sure.
It's amazing how much information. Some of these groups are very well organized, and there's a good place to ask questions when you have questions, because chances are there's someone else, even though, like I was saying, everything is so individual, you might run across somebody else that has had something similar to your situation that they can help you with.
True. Well, that's excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you for sharing your journey and the process that you went through to finally become a dual US and Italian citizen. I loved following the journey that you went on as you traveled through Italy. It's one of my favorite places, though we haven't been to Sicily, and it is on my list of places I want to go. So I super enjoyed that, seeing your photos and seeing you kind of like go through that, and I could live vicariously. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. And thank you for taking time to come on the show and share your experience with the listeners. I so appreciate it, Denise. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. It was fun. Thank you.
Good. All right. Well, we'll talk soon.